Wednesday morning. It's January 27th, 2021. I'm Guy McPherson of GuyMcPherson.com. GuyMcPherson.com will take you to Nature Bats Last. I would strongly encourage you to go there upon seeing this video because I have embedded the papers to which I will be referring on the post indicated as Science Update. The post includes a few papers. One of them comes from The Conversation, authored by Corey Bradshaw and Daniel Blumstein, titled, "Worried About Earth's Future? Well, the outlook is worse than even scientists can grasp." If I were writing that headline, I would write it as, well, the outlook is worse than even some scientists can grasp, because some scientists, including me, have grasped the magnitude of the crisis that we face. I have great respect for the scholars I'm going to mention, the authors of these two papers, and what I'm doing here has nothing to do with defaming these amazing scholars. Rather, I'm pointing to evidence that I think has been overlooked in both of these papers. The paper in The Conversation is co-authored by two of the, I believe it's 17 authors in the peer-reviewed journal articles Frontiers in Conservation Science. Okay, so first, paper in The Conservation, again from January 13th, 2021, as is the peer-reviewed article. They get to the point right away. We provide a timely snapshot of the crises that must be addressed now. And also in the paper, they correctly point out that academics tend to specialize in one discipline, which means they're in many cases unfamiliar with the complex system in which planetary scale problems and their potential solutions exist. That's exactly right, as you would expect from the conservation biologist authors of this paper. They go on, more broadly, the human optimism bias, thinking bad things are more likely to befall others than yourself, means many people underestimate the environmental crisis. And I would add to that many people underestimate the environmental crisis because they know so little about the environment and how greatly we depend upon the environment for our own survival. And then toward the end, they point out that about 1 million plant and animal species globally are threatened with extinction. And actually that's surprising because the lead author of this paper at The Conservation, Corey Bradshaw, is the author of the paper that points out that 5 to 6 degrees C increase in global average temperature will drive all life on Earth to extinction due to what he coins in that article with Strona, co-extinctions. So I'm surprised that this paper in The Conversation underplays or downplays the magnitude of the crisis we face. Let's turn to the paper in Frontiers in Conservation Science. Again, this came out on January 13th, 2021. It includes authors that are among the best known, renowned, respected scientists on Earth. I know a few of them personally. I've interviewed others on the Nature Bats Last YouTube channel. I have great respect for all of these amazingly good scholars. The paper is titled Underestimating the Challenges of Avoiding a Ghastly Future, and what they're trying to do here is point out that we have underestimated for a long time how terrible the situation really is and is likely to become. And of course, it's only going to get worse. In the second sentence of the paper, they point out, we review the evidence that future environmental conditions will be more dangerous than currently believed. There's no question about that. We ask what political or economic system or leadership is prepared to handle the predicted disasters or even capable of such action. Not once in this paper do they cite any of the 5 peer-reviewed articles, at least 5 peer-reviewed articles by Tim Garrett, pointing out that civilization is a heat engine no matter how it's powered. I'm surprised and disappointed that this paper concludes that there is some way we can maintain civilization, maintain this set of living arrangements and not continue to overheat the Earth. That notion is unsupported by evidence. This dire situation places an extraordinary responsibility on scientists to speak out candidly and accurately when engaging with government, business, and the public. I couldn't agree more with that, and I think this is a classic case of downplaying the magnitude of the crisis. Okay, in one of the sections titled Sixth Mass Extinction, apparently these conservation biologists are unaware that we're in the midst of at least the 8th mass extinction event on Earth in the last 2 billion years. There's no mention within this section of the August 2010 report from the United Nations Environment Program, pointing out that we drive an estimated 150 to 200 species to extinction every day. This goes back, in other words, more than 10 years. So for more than a decade, we've been in the midst of this mass extinction event, and we know that we've been in the midst of it. They go on to present very good evidence, but there is no mention of the aerosol masking effect, and there is little to zero mention of self-reinforcing feedback loops and the importance of those feedback loops. For the section subtitled Climate Disruption that begins on page 4, I'm going to turn to a relatively short essay that's in the sidebar or at the bottom, depending upon what kind of device you're using, of Nature Bats Last, GuyMcPherson.com. It's called Relevant Points for Interviewers, and there are about a dozen of these relevant points, and they're very short, and through links, they lead to additional information. For example, one of the points is, the rate of environmental change is reportedly 10,000 times faster than vertebrates can adapt, according to a peer-reviewed paper by Quintero and Weens published in Ecology Letters on June 26, 2013. There's no mention of this paper in the new paper in Frontiers in Conservation Science. Again, the rate of environmental change is 10,000 times faster than vertebrates can adapt. That's hugely important given that we are vertebrates. Also no mention of a paper by Davis and colleagues published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences on October 30th, 2018 that indicates mammals can't keep up either, and we're vertebrate mammals. That spells trouble to me. There's no mention of the paper by Burke and colleagues in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences on December 26th, 2018, that the best analog for the future is the Pliocene, and that the Pliocene-style climate is coming as soon as 2030. In addition, this paper relies upon the representative concentration pathways of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which notoriously downplay the magnitude of the crisis by excluding at least 6 dozen self-reinforcing feedback loops that we know about, and also never mentioning the aerosol masking effect or global dimming. And in the paper in Frontiers in Conservation Science, they don't mention the paper by Burke and colleagues, which is a recent paper that clearly should have come to the attention of these folks as they were writing this paper. There's also no mention of the paper by Colin Raymond and colleagues published in Science Advances on May 8th, 2020, so quite a recent paper. And that paper by Raymond and colleagues indicates that we have surpassed lethal wet bulb temperatures in various places around the globe, most notably in the tropics and subtropics of Earth. There's no mention that we already are losing habitat for humans on Earth in this important recent paper in Frontiers in Conservation Science. Also, there's no mention of the paper by Maslowski and colleagues published in the 2012 issue of the Annual Review of Earth and Planetary Sciences, projecting an ice-free Arctic in 2016 plus or minus 3 years. Now, they were wrong. The projection, which was a linear projection, turned out to be incorrect. But still, that paper by Maslowski and colleagues presents strong evidence that that ice-free Arctic is coming very soon. And this is critically important with respect to consequent rate of environmental change after the loss of ice in the Arctic. Of course, the paper by Bradshaw and colleagues includes mention of the paper by Strona and Bradshaw. Yes, it's the same Bradshaw, pointing to a 5 to 6 degree global average temperature rise causing the loss of all life on Earth. So they mention it, but they fail to point out how quickly we are headed for that 5 to 6 degree global average temperature rise. In addition, there's not a single word about the irreversibility of the environmental change and the climate crisis in which we are currently embedded, despite the fact that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change put out a report in September of 2019 indicating that climate change is now irreversible. And they pointed to the warming of the oceans as the cause of that irreversibility. So we have an irreversible, catastrophic situation with respect to abrupt climate change. There's no way out. We're headed for a very high temperature in a very short period of time, and these details are not included in this overview paper in Frontiers in Conservation Science. So again, I think scientists have underestimated the challenges of avoiding a ghastly future. I think that scientists, in this case, all of whom I respect greatly, continue to downplay the severity of the crisis and point to decades or centuries out and what the situation will look like then. Well, in decades or centuries, there will be no humans on Earth, so there will be nobody to record the data on how rapidly the changes have occurred. Well, that's it for this week. You can look forward to another one of these really bad news updates with respect to science in about a week.